Hello. Hi, everyone. Oh, there we go.
It
Perfect.
worked.
It worked. We're on. Well,
Excellent.
thank you so much for joining me. I'm just going to wait, I guess, a little bit for people to roll in and everyone get
Yes.
comfortable. Um,
Thank you for inviting me. Hi,
yeah,
Stephanie.
thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited to have you on because one of the top topics that so many people ask me about is co-parenting, and it's so hard to navigate that. So
hmm
I think that this will be super helpful to everyone. I know it'll be helpful for me.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And yeah, we all know co-parenting. I always use that term loosely. It's never co-parenting. It's parallel parenting with someone like this. So if anyone's watching, it's co-parenting would be nice. Is it possible?
We're getting a lot of hearts on that, so there's a lot of agreement, unfortunately.
Mm.
Good
But it's
evening. Oh, we
okay.
have a lot of viewers from everywhere. We have
Hello.
Mexico. Thank you guys so
Yeah.
much. So, everyone, for those of you that don't know, this is Sarah from Narc Proof and Thriving. And I asked her to come on to kind of help us navigate through some co-parenting difficulties, through boundaries, children's emotions, how to deal with the new spouse of the co-parent. So I think as we get started, we're gonna have questions rolling through, but we're gonna try to save those for the end. So you
Yeah.
can post them, but I think they might fly by a little bit quickly for us. So we'll hold a little bit of a Q&A at the end for you guys. But to get us started, Sarah, why don't
Yes.
you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got started.
Yeah, so my name is Sarah Kamoto, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm high conflict co-parenting coach. When I say co-parenting, I always use air quotes because it really means parallel parenting. Because if you're here listening to this, you're not co-parenting with someone who is, quote unquote, normal, in a sense that they're either toxic, narcissistic, emotionally abusive, difficult, whatever it may be. They all fall into the same bucket. So co-parenting, I always mean parallel parenting. We know that co-parenting, traditional co-parenting, is not possible. Uh, I have to co-parent with somebody who is, or I consider to be, high conflict, and I have managed to, I say this, put them on the outside of my life, even though I still have to deal with them. And I know that if I can do that, it's possible for other people, and that's what I teach my clients. Obviously, it's not just that easy. You have to actually do something. You can't just be at the mercy of this person. You're no longer together, no longer married, in a relationship. They will try and control you, but the whole idea is, and what I teach my clients, is to take control yourself. And that takes being intentional, that takes wanting to do it and believing that it's possible. If you don't believe it's possible, then it's really not going to happen for you, unfortunately. Um, so over the years, I've just kind of developed my tools and strategies, and then that's what I pass on to my clients so that they can actually find some kind of peace in their life, regardless and despite the fact they have someone over there who's trying to destroy everything that they're trying to create. So yeah, that's it. In a
Yeah,
nutshell.
and I so agree with you. I think that when we first get started on the journey, and I know through the polls on stories, there's about 50% of the people who polled that are in the beginning to 3 years of their co-parenting journey. And I think
Yeah.
that it's so difficult to remember that if we can control what's within us and how we feel and the positivity that flows through us about the situation, then we'll eventually make it through it. So I think it's so hard
Yes.
setting that mind frame, though. It's really tough. But
It
um,
is, and if you don't know where to start, then it is a nightmare.
truly. And I think one of the biggest
Mm,
things for, most people is how do you establish those boundaries and how do you kind of get yourself in a position where you're not being controlled and manipulated by someone, but you're able to kind of protect yourself and put your needs before
mm.
theirs. I think that was a really hot
Well,
topic for people.
this is where it all starts. I mean, when you've been through it, if you said like the first 1 to 3 years, I like to call that the nightmare years, because you're still trying to find your feet, you're trying to parent, you're trying to heal, and you're trying to quote unquote co-parent. So it's very overwhelming. There's a lot going on. There's a lot happening. It's not just you have to focus on. It's your children, protecting them, supporting them because they have a parent of this nature. They're going to be going between homes. You might be in and out of the family court system. So it's a lot on your plate, and it's a lot for one person. So I get a lot of people who think that their situations are unique. And I just want to say, like, no one's situation is unique, and it's not to downplay or invalidate their experience. You know, it's a bit like racism. If you've been through racism, all our experiences are different, but the effect is, you know, you've been discriminated against because of the color of your skin, like narcissistic abuse or this kind of abuse. Yes, all our situations are different. Yes, the perpetrator is different, but it's the pattern of behavior that is the same. So nobody's situation is actually unique. And believing that it's unique also stops you from finding solutions because you think the solution is unique, and it isn't. So I don't want anyone coming for me.
No, I think that's a really great point, because in the beginning it feels like your world is ending. No one understands what you're going through.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you start to tell people about what's happening, they look at you like you're nuts.
Yeah.
But
nuts,
at the end of the day,
overly sensitive.
Right. And at the end of the day, you know, there's 90,000 people who are relating to, you know, my Instagram page, and there's 50 something relating to yours. So right there, there's already 100 and something thousand people who are going through similar experiences.
We're not making it up.
Right? It is crazy. But I think what you mean is, you know, you're not alone. And I think that's a huge contender in my healing journey, is that there's definitely people who do understand you once you find them.
Yes. And it's isolating, of course. The whole experience is isolating. And you speak to your friends and family, or you speak to those around you, and they do not understand as much as they try to, because it's such an obscure topic. It's such a crazy thing. And the person who they know isn't the same person that you're describing. So, of course, it's very hard for people to understand your experience. And you do feel like you can maybe go over the top with your story and say that they've said and done all these terrible things. People just don't get it because it just sounds like something from the movies. But it's true and it's real.
Exactly. And I think to play along with that too, a lot of the times I think that the healthy co-parent feels ashamed of what's going on. And a lot of times the people around them are telling them, well, try to get along for the kids. You have to do this for the kids' sake, right?
Yeah.
That's something that's always kind of told to us. But at the end of the day, this is not dealing with a normal individual. This is an unhealthy individual. So I think that you need to surround yourself around people who are supportive of you and can embrace you and kind of help guide you without making you feel ashamed of what's happening. But
yeah. And hold that space and can understand, because you don't have to over explain to people who know. If somebody knows, they know. There's no over explaining. You don't have to go into detail about what happened. It's like, we get it. You dealt with someone of that nature. We know what it's like. The patterns of behavior are all the same. Although it feels like your situation is unique, it really isn't. And that's a good thing, because it means that there is help available and there is something you can do about it. I think a lot of women don't think that there's anything they can do to fix or change the situation. Yes, we can't control that other person. Wishing that they're going to be the perfect parent isn't going to work. Wishing that they're going to be exactly how you want them to be, or come on board, be amicable, it's not going to work. But what is within you, what's within your control, is a heck of a lot more than what you believe. So it all starts with believing that there can be change, and then asking yourself the question, how can I initiate that and be in control of that? What's within my control? Because there's a lot that you can do, and I'm not unique. I mean, we're all unique, but I'm not unique. So if I can be diligent and consistent and do the things that I need to do and apply the tools and strategies, then there's no reason why other people can't as well. But it just takes wanting to. If you don't want to or don't see a reason to, then you can stay in that position, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I'm curious, when we go back to communicating and setting those initial boundaries when we're first getting going with the unhealthy co-parent, what are some good tips to be able to kind of put us into a position of control over ourselves and not letting the unhealthy co-parent kind of make us feel crazy and overwhelmed and anxious and upset?
Yeah, well, there's three things that need to happen when you have a high conflict co-parent. It's like three things that need to happen at the same time. So you need to protect your own energy, whether that's face to face or when you're communicating with them by email or an app. There's keeping them at a safe distance, so keeping them out of your space physically and emotionally, but more importantly, emotionally, don't let them into your space energetically. And also protecting your children, which means supporting them in the best way possible, because they have a parent of this nature and they don't necessarily know, they usually don't know what this parent is like. They are getting some of the effects, and you'll notice and hear things from your children that they have to walk on eggshells, or that they are being controlled and coerced and emotionally abused. That's why it's important to learn what you need to learn so you can be your child's first teacher, because they're going to learn from you. And if you don't know how, then how are they going to have a chance? So you are their only chance at kind of navigating this and having or managing a parent of this nature, because they've got however many years of having this parent. They may decide when they're old enough to understand to completely go no contact or limit their contact. But until then, you are their advocate, you are their teacher, and they can't learn from you if you don't know yourself, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think that, you know, when you do leave a high conflict person, your first instinct is you don't want your children anywhere near them. And unfortunately, with all of the family court systems and stuff like that, that's not always possible. And I'm lucky enough where I didn't have a super high conflict situation. Most of our dynamic was more towards each other. And if there was a lower residual, you know, interference with my own child, but it was really more because of us having conflict together. So I was scared to let my child go, only because I was with her 24/7. But I know that there's a lot of people out there who aren't as lucky and who have more extreme cases of it. So that gets a little bit more difficult. How do you trust that person with your kids? And also, how do you trust yourself to be able to control your emotions so that way when they do return, you can help bring your kids back to a healthy state of mind?
Yeah, that is always a concern, and it's always a worry. And that worry, I'm not going to say it goes away, but it does quieten once you get to a place where you can manage your own emotions, trust in yourself, and you do your work. Like it isn't going to serve anyone to worry. It's just going to make you sick, and it's going to keep you stuck. That is just a fact. But getting to a place where it's not like you feel comfortable, but you get to a place where you're better able to manage the thought that your child has to go to the other home, what they're going to be doing, what's going to be happening, what's their head going to be filled with. You can only control yourself and your peace. So it's getting to that place where you manage your own emotions. You've got to put those tools and strategies in place and have those healthy coping mechanisms and the support. It is isolating, and nobody really does understand. That's why it's so important to have a community, to have a place to go to, and to learn what is necessary for you to kind of regulate your own emotions, so that you get to a place where you are calm. If your child does come back and says something or does something, or they're upset, you don't, fly off the handle. You're able to manage that and manage their emotions, but you can't manage their emotions if you can't manage yours. That's just how it is. And, get into that frame of mind of finding that level of peace that your child is going over there. It's only for X amount of hours or days, whatever it may be. They're going to come back to you. And like I say to my clients and the people I work with, you have to parent 1,000 times harder, but it doesn't mean it is harder. It just means you just have to be, you've got a lot of undoing and redoing to do. That's all.
Yeah. And I think that dynamic is kind of normal with all divorced parents. I think that there's always that letdown time in between switching homes. And so I took a little thought into that myself when we started the journey, where I was very upset because every time our daughter returned to us, she was always so emotionally unbalanced. She, would cry for no reason. She's a toddler, so it's always hard to kind
Mm.
of navigate why she's having those feelings at this time. And what I
Yeah.
learned from my own experience is that I was also a divorcee kid. So I remember to myself how difficult it was to transition. So once I figured out how
Hmm.
to help her, bring her back into being emotionally balanced through a routine, it made things a little bit easier. But those first 3 days are so tough. So it takes a little time.
Yes, and then you've got to send them back again.
Yeah.
And then you've
And
got
then
to
it's a cycle
send
that
them back again.
continues
That's why,
forever.
yes, in perpetuity. But it's routines are so important. It depends on the age of the child, but routines are so important. Having, I call it a narc-proof home, is
Mm,
important. Having that peace in your bubble. Your bubble is here. This is your home. Their home is over there. There are no boundaries. There are no rules, or maybe there's lots of rules. But your
mm,
home is different. And of course, for a child, they have to adapt. The two homes are going to be polar opposites,
right.
and the child will be a different child. And they are going to be emotionally dysregulated. They are going to be maybe throwing tantrums and not sure how to manage their own emotions because they don't know what they're going through. I mean, we've been in these relationships and these marriages. You didn't know what was going on when you were in it. So how can you expect a child to know and understand?
Right.
It's just that they lash out and express it in a different way. That's why we have to focus on our own healing,
Mhm.
regulate our emotions, get to a place where we are grounded so that we are their supporter. We can hold that space for them. And your
Mhm.
home is their safe place. As a
Right.
mum, your home is always going to be the safe place. You are their safe place. But when you have someone else trying to counter that, you need to do it on steroids. And that's what I teach my clients, to
Yeah,
have
and
this
there's
not-proof
no
home,
there's
because we
no
cannot
talking
control
to
what
the
happens
other
over there.
oh, sorry. There's no talking to the other
There's no
co-parent
what, sorry?
trying to get them to see that they're not doing things that are in the best interest of the child. You can't argue with them that, they're doing things wrong or they need to try harder to stay on a routine. They're always going to say, it's my house. I'm doing things differently. You can't control what I'm saying. And
My
so
rules.
they're my rules, my
Yeah,
house. We're two
of
separate
course.
households. And, in a traditional co parenting relationship, that's not how
Yeah.
that's supposed to be. You're supposed to try to make things as seamless as possible for the transitioning of the kids. But in a high conflict co parenting situation, there's just no breaking through to the other co parent on that's the normalized way. So
You'll waste your time.
it is.
Waste your time and energy doing that. I mean, anyone's welcome to test that theory, but you will
I've
waste your
tried.
time and energy trying to do that. Yeah, it's not worth it, and your energy is better focused on yourself and your children. That is it. The other person doesn't want to be on board. They're never going to be on board, and that's why I always say I know nothing about co-parenting, because that needs two emotionally healthy adults who look out for the best interest of their children. If
Mm.
you're here watching this, you follow my page or maybe your page, that is not a possibility. So let's just accept that and see what we can do, which what's within our control. There's a lot within our control, and I think a lot of women feel disempowered naturally, but there is a lot within your control if you're intentional with what you want for you and your children.
Yeah. And I think that early on, I realized we kind of discussed a little bit the routines for when they do come home, the children. I try to make coming home as happy and peaceful as possible. We try to do something fun. We get ice cream, but something to kind of make them feel more welcomed and seen. And, as my daughter gets older, we kind of start to talk about feelings a little bit more. So she is kind of acting out right when we get through the door. I'll ask her, well, why are you feeling this way? Do you miss daddy? Like, did you miss mommy? And we'll try to have those conversations. But with her being so young, it's hard to kind of get that out
Mm.
of her. But I think creating the routine,
Yeah, and
trying to make them feel as special as possible when they come home really helped with my circumstances. So,
yes, and just holding that space for her, maybe not even any questions, just follow her lead. What I teach my clients is it depends on the age of the child, but they need their kind of decompression time, whether they want to go in their room and read, whether they want to go and play, whether they just want to be quiet or switch off in front of the computer game, whatever it is, each child is an individual. They have their own way to decompress, but
Mm-hmm.
to be as open and in tune with them and follow their lead, not push too much, but also just know that, let them know that you're there. And if they do
Mm-hmm.
want to share something with you, that they are free to. And
I
that
like.
is built over time. And that's the thing, like, some children may assume if you don't say anything and let them know explicitly, they may assume that you and the other parent in the same way, and that they can't go to you because they can't go to that one. But they
Mm-hmm.
need to know explicitly that they are safe to come to you with anything, even if they think it's going to hurt your feelings.
Right. And
You
to
know,
remain as
but
calm as
obviously,
possible when they do come to you, because we hear things
yes,
sometimes that just really are upsetting, but we can't let the child
yes,
know how upset we are when we hear those things, because then it'll make them, scared to come to you or feel bad for coming to you. So it's really quite
exactly.
difficult, but to be able to compose yourself as best as possible and be able to communicate to them in a calm way.
Yeah. Yeah, and it takes work and it takes intention, but it's not like hard work, it's worthy work. And also, they are going to trigger you. They may say something that you've heard before from your high conflict ex. They may do something that is triggering. They're going to trigger you. Now, if you don't have your shit together, you're going to spiral and you may react. And you may
Yeah.
react in a way that isn't necessarily healthy. So you really need to be thinking about and being intentional with your actions and how you respond and how you react. And if you can't deal with it in the moment, it's okay to take yourself away, regulate yourself, and then come back and deal with the situation. Because, yeah, they are going to say and do things that are going to be reminiscent of what you've heard and seen in the
Mhm.
past. And it is going to trigger you if you don't kind of have that part of your life sorted.
Right. And that gets easier, I think, as time goes on too. It's much harder to be able to put those hurt feelings aside when it's happening, when everything's so fresh. But I think
Mm.
as you practice
Yeah.
it, you kind of tune those things out and it doesn't affect you as much, which is cool.
Yes. In the early months and early years, it is hard.
Mhm.
But that is where I personally think you need to put the most work in those
Mhm.
early months and early years. Because, like you said, it is practice. You can't just do something once, like brushing your teeth. You don't brush your teeth once and then you're good. You're going to
Right.
have root canals, you're going to have rotten teeth and plaque buildup.
Hmm.
You have to do this consistently and diligently and be intentional. If you're not intentional and if you don't believe it's possible, then guess what? It isn't possible. You will be at the mercy of this person for the next 18 plus years. Because it's not just, it doesn't end when they're 18, unfortunately.
Right. And I think
It
that's where a lot of people
continues.
say, I have, 10 years left. I only have 12 years left. I only have 3 years left. But at the end of the day, you might still have to see them at a
Mm.
wedding, or you might have to see them at college graduation
Yeah,
until the
it'll be
children
less
decide.
frequent.
Right. And, you know,
Yeah.
I'm always in the mindset of I want to support the relationship between my child and the co-parent to the best of my ability. I don't want those negative feelings to be put on our child, because then it could come
Mm.
back onto me, where I'm the reason why they don't get along. I'm the reason why, dad's not around, or, this, that, and the other thing. But instead, to let them kind of go through these experiences on their own and come to those conclusions on their own, which is what you kind of stated
Yeah,
earlier in the conversation. Um,
and they will. They
yeah.
will if you, as long as you are grounded, you are supported, you do your work, you have that support, and you have these tools and strategies and coping mechanisms in place. Children aren't stupid. They know a lot more and they take on a lot more than we realize. And they
Yeah.
may not have the right words to articulate it, but they feel it. They know. They instinctively know. So it's just kind of like, almost like, yes, biding your time until they get to the point where they start asking questions, and you're going
Mhm.
to have to know how to answer them in a way where you're not bad mouthing the other one, but you're
Mhm.
telling the truth. And you need to use age appropriate language. You need
Mhm.
to have the right kind of phrasing, because yes, you don't want to hurt the person or talk badly about the person that they love. They are going to love this person. And that's also what I work with my clients on as well. Age appropriate language to explain situations, because questions will come and they're going to be
Mhm.
hard and they're going to be tricky and they might throw you off guard. So you're going to have to know how to deal with that and navigate that in a healthy way, and in a way where you're not triggered. And
Right. And a
also
way where,
lies will be coming from there, and you have to be ready.
yes, and that was one of
Mhm.
another popular question was how do we handle when, the kids come home, they're saying, well, daddy said this and, grandma said this, they said that you're bad and all those hurtful things. How do you talk to them about it and say, well, sometimes people say hurtful things, but that doesn't mean that they're true. And staying calm.
Yeah, it's a fine line between being diplomatic and telling the truth, because a lot of women unfortunately fall into the trap of not saying anything. So saying nothing to a child means that, oh, I'll just believe the one that's saying all the stuff. And that's also not a place to get to. I mean, I think they think that they're protecting their children by not saying anything, and I don't agree with that, because then they start listening to the one who's barking the loudest,
Right.
and they are lies. So you need to get to a place where you're not necessarily defending yourself, but you need to use the right language and the right phrasing and satisfy their question, without bad mouthing the other one,
Right.
and to kind of get them to a place where they can think for themselves as well, and come to and arrive at their own conclusions. It is hard when you're being pummeled with questions and where they are filling their head with lies. That is hard, and that's where you really need the support and know how to navigate that as it's unfolding, because they will absorb a lot of what's being told. And the good place to be is where they are sharing these things with you. When they stop talking and stop sharing, that's a big red flag for something's happening.
Right. And so
Yeah.
I know it's very difficult for people to kind of get to this space, and not everyone has the availability to do so, but a lot of the times it's so helpful to have the child go into therapy if you find that they're starting to close off from yourself. I don't know what your thoughts are on all of that.
I have mixed thoughts about that.
Yeah.
There are great therapists, there are great psychologists, there are great psychiatrists out there. From my personal experience, unless they have experience with this kind of emotional abuse, and I don't mean necessarily first-hand experience, just some knowledge, they don't seem to be taught this when they are studying, then it is very difficult, because I find that they give solutions that, and coping skills that will work with normal situations, but not necessarily this kind of dynamic. Like in the ideal world, if a therapist has been through narcissistic abuse or emotional abuse, or a psychologist has been through it and then they specialize in that area, that would be the ideal place to be. Same with a lawyer. If a lawyer or attorney has experienced that firsthand, and now they practice and support people through that, that is the ideal place to be in.
Well, and you're so right on that.
So I think it's...
Sorry. You're so right on that, because even
No,
with
that's
my
okay.
own healing journey, it took me, I had no one to talk to about what was going on. My friends didn't understand, my family didn't understand. And so I started looking into therapy as a way to try to find someone who understood where I was coming from. And the majority of the time, the blame was put back onto me. And I think that a lot of the times, like you were saying, the therapists are just not trained properly on how to identify these personality disorders and these high conflict people. So I went
They
through
can do
several
more harm than
therapists.
good.
Yeah.
They can
I
do
was
more harm
lucky
than good
enough.
sometimes. Yeah.
I was lucky enough where I found someone who was the one that actually told me about narcissistic qualities. So she was the one
Excellent.
who put me on that track. And I was like, oh my gosh, everything you're saying makes sense. And then it turned into me wanting to share with the world that this is a real thing.
Yes.
But you're right. It took
Yes.
so long to find
Yeah.
someone who actually understood in a professional setting. So,
They're not all created equally. They aren't all created equally.
yeah.
Sorry. They are all created equally. I mean, if you find one that has experience and knowledge, that is great. That is the best place to be in. But it's not just, I was let down. A lot of my clients have been let down by their therapist, and they have done more harm than good, because yes, they can gaslight you. They can turn it around onto you. And of course, you're taking the blame anyway. And then here's someone else who's a professional also telling you that you are partly to blame. It doesn't work
Right.
that way. And there are some great therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists out there. Some of them have been my clients, and just because they are qualified in that area doesn't mean that they know about and how to navigate these personality types in their own co-parenting situations. They try their best, and that's all they can do. But yeah, you really do have to do your due diligence when looking for a lawyer, when looking for a therapist. And yes, for your children, of course, yes, it is a little bit different because they're the child of somebody like this. So if you can find a child psychologist who has some great tools and coping strategies for your child, that'd be great. But as long as they're not causing more harm by having this lack of knowledge.
Yeah, I remember when my parents were going through divorce, it was actually extremely high conflict in itself. The lawyer I actually spoke to, and he said that it was one of the most high conflict cases that he's had in 30 years. So it was a 6-year divorce. There was a lot of mud throwing. And something that really helped me and my 3 sisters is we went into art therapy, where we were able to express our emotions, but we weren't expected to be told how we should be feeling. And so it really taught us how to work through those things properly instead of just being slammed with what you should be doing.
Yes, and having somewhere to channel that those feelings and emotions.
Yeah, so through hobbies, but the art therapy really did wonders for personally myself. But again, it's about finding the right professional, I suppose.
It is, and they are so different. They are so different, and they all specialize in, have their own different specialities. But yeah, support for your children. I mean, it starts with you as the parent, as the healthy parent. And then if you feel they need further support, then you need to go and source that from the right place, not just take it for granted that someone is a therapist, that they are going to support your child in the best possible way. You have to take some of that responsibility as well. Just like, you put your child through school, you can't take it for granted that they're going to get the best education just from school. You have to be a part of that as well.
Right. And someone just commented, it caught my eye. I was told I need an attorney who understands toxic people. And I think that's so true. When you're going through the family court system, you do have to go to all those extremes. You don't have to hire the first attorney that you speak to. You should kind of treat it as an interview. Sure, right? You have to make sure that they understand what exactly is happening and that you really need some extra protection. Because if you find the right lawyer, they will fight for you and they will put things in place to protect you.
They will advocate for you. I think, again, like with the therapist, a lot of people take it for granted. Oh, this person has a law degree, they can help me. No, you are just a case, you are just a number. And they have all their situations are high conflict. That's why you're going through the court system. But this is a different level of high conflict. It's not just 2 people who just can't agree on this, that, and the other. It goes deeper than that, as we know.
Right. And
so yeah, it is like an interview.
Right. And it trickles down even to mediators, because I did see someone comment something about, a mediator put the blame on the healthier parent. And unfortunately, from what I've experienced, you don't really get to choose the mediator in most cases. Typically the lawyers, if you have lawyers, they pick one for you. They have to agree on one. And if it is something that's court ordered, you're kind of stuck with them. So
yes, and if they have the lack of knowledge, they're gonna screw you up at this very crucial time.
Right.
And I just want to share a quick story. Oh, sorry. No, carry on.
No, I was just going to say it touches back on making sure you have the right lawyer. I think that's probably the most important thing, because the right lawyer will be able to advocate for you and pick a mediator who they think is going to help with the situation. But please tell your story. I'm very interested to know.
More suited.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's okay. No, it reminded me, I had a client, one-on-one client who was divorcing somebody of this nature. And they were going through mediation, and the actual mediator was the same mediator that mediated her soon-to-be ex-husband and his first wife.
Oh.
That is a conflict of interest, and that is not helpful. And so she knew him already and was kind of, I guess, a fan. So that is just going to go against you right from the start. So mediation is a waste of time if something like that happens. I mean, that's kind of rare, but we're in a small town.
Yeah.
So the mediator was the same one. that should not be the case, because that they're going to be biased.
Wow, I didn't even think about that
So
happening.
yeah, the same mediator for the first wife, and then now this one. So that is a complete no-no. So don't assume that they have everything, like crossing their T's and dotting their I's and everything is above board, because I'm not saying they did anything dodgy, but if it's a small town, there's not many mediators, that is a big red flag, and it should be someone who is unbiased.
Yeah. No, I agree. And no, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, but plus mediation doesn't and very rarely works with somebody of this nature. So don't expect miracles from the mediator either, or from the
Right.
mediation process.
Right. I think that with my own parents' divorce, it was about 6 years of them going through the divorce, doing the child custody and all of that. And I think that I don't even know how many mediations they went to. It was so long ago, but I just remember there was back to back to back mediations and nothing was ever resolved. It would just go around in circles for 3 hours. And then it was always, well, we'll put a pin in it and then we'll revisit later down the road. So
it drains your energy, it drains your finances, and it drains all your other resources to go through that process over and over again. Even to deal with lawyers when they don't understand your situation, you waste a lot of time and money.
Right.
Especially if you're not able to communicate with them what you're dealing with in an effective way.
Right. And this is kind of not off topic, but just to clarify, someone asked if mediators are less money before an attorney. And I think it really depends. Some people represent themselves pro se, and then the court appoints them a mediator, and that way it splits the cost evenly between the two individuals. So they might charge $3.50 an hour, and then each person gets billed half. Sometimes, in certain cases, there'll be an order where the mediator can decide where they split it. So if they find that one parent is being more of an issue than the other parent, they might say, okay, difficult parent, you get 75%, healthy parent, you get 25%. But sometimes, like in my own case, both me and my ex both have lawyers. So we were paying them to be there with us. And then we also had to pay the mediator. So it really just was an added cost.
Yeah, it adds up. It adds up.
It's crazy.
All of this whole experience adds up. So yeah, it's a cost. Going through this experience is going to cost you, not just emotionally. It costs you financially, and it depends how you want to go about that. If you want to reduce your costs, you need to have some kind of plan in place. You need to have some kind of strategy, and you need to know how to communicate your experience without getting into your story, because that's just going to take time, and time is money when you're speaking to lawyers. So if you can speak in as a factual, straight to the point way, it's hard, but there is a way to do that. Then you cut to the chase and they know top line the facts, and then they can advocate for you. If they have to sift through your story, it's going to be very difficult for them, and it's going to take time and money.
Right. And, someone asked about how much it can be. I know that my one friend got divorced and she just went out and it was just a couple $1,000s, which is still a lot of money. And then there are some cases that get into 6 figures. So I think on average, it's probably, yeah, it's just ridiculous. I think on average, it's probably around like 20 or 30,000 if it's a super high conflict situation.
It really depends.
But it depends.
Depends where you are. Depends where you are in the world. It depends on your lawyer. It depends on how organized you are as well. And it depends on your strategy, because, lawyers are there to make money. It's their job. And not to say all lawyers are like this, but some lawyers will be very happy to just drag things out and delay things, especially your high conflict ex's lawyer. They will delay. They will not show up.
It's a game.
Tactics in place to draw it out because they want to win. Lawyers want to win. That's why they go into that game in the first place. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, if anyone thinks that they're, whatever, not all lawyers, but they are there to win. And if they're working for your high conflict ex, they're going to draw things out. They're going to delay things. They're going to put certain things in place to derail you, to exhaust you, and to drain your resources. Strategy is so important.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it can cost 2,000. It could cost 200,000, depending on who you are and what's going on and what's at stake.
Yeah, I think someone just commented my divorce cost over 60,000. So, and that's not to scare
Yeah.
anyone because I know that that might deter some people from wanting to leave a high conflict person, but it's just the reality of the
Yes.
situation that you have to be somewhat prepared that
And
things
I just want to
get.
say, yeah, things could get messy. But I mean, I know in the US, it's a litigious country. You
Hmm.
can self-represent,
Hmm.
and which is obviously not going to cost you money, but you need to then be prepared. You need to have a strategy, you need to have a plan, and you need to have all your ducks in a row, all your documentation. It means
Hmm.
being organized, but it is possible. That's all
Hmm.
I'm going to say. Like, you don't have to hire a lawyer. And also, just because they have hired a lawyer, you, again, don't have to hire a lawyer.
Right. And I think that where a lot of people go wrong is that they think that the judge and all these people are going to care if you get into the emotional side of things, but they don't at the end of the day. They just don't care.
No,
So you have to
they don't.
do everything factual. You have to present the facts clear so that way the judge and everyone else can make the decisions based on the facts. They don't care at the end of the day if, someone called you a bad word or if they're never, if they're always making the kids feel bad, but they care about, if the other parent is showing up, they care about if the other parent
Yeah.
has been physically abusive, and you have to be able to prove the things that you're stating where it's a waste of time.
Yes. Yeah. And um, I just want to say, like, it is tempting to give your story and
Hmm.
to appeal to the lawyers or the judge or the mediator. Of course, you are going to be emotional, having to retell and give accounts of what's happened to you, but it doesn't serve you to stay there. You just need to give the facts. You just need to stay above board. You just need to answer the questions that they're asking and not
Hmm.
go too far out, because unfortunately they see a lot of cases, they see a lot of people. Unless there is a safety risk to your children, like your high conflict ex has guns and knives, or they're a murderer, or drug addict, you are
Mm-hmm.
all put in the same basket as everyone else. You know your situation, you know the hell you've been through. They don't give a shit about that because they don't have the time to, unfortunately. They don't have the time. So it will serve you to be able to speak to them in a factual manner,
Hmm.
give the facts, document everything to the letter. It might seem really over the top. You have to document everything and
Hmm.
continue to document everything, because that is truth and that is fact. If you have email evidence of abuse, document that and save it and file it away.
Hmm.
Um, and I've got this free checklist for speaking to third parties, because it depends who they are. Whether it's your friends and family, sure, you can spill the beans and give your whole story. A lawyer, a judge, an attorney isn't going to give two hoots about your story. They just want to know, what are the facts? How am I going to defend you? And how am I going to advocate for you? That is
Exactly.
it. And that's all that's necessary.
And just to kind of wrap up on that, from what I've noticed is that as time goes on and you are able to document and put things into motion through the court system, um, the judge and the lawyers, they usually start to catch on eventually that the person is a problem. At least where I'm at, I've noticed it a lot, through friends and through myself, but they kind of see the patterns and the behaviors and they don't believe the lies that the other parent is telling, um, to a certain degree. So as long as you are able to prove the things that you're able to say, everyone will kind of start to catch on, hopefully.
In some cases, yes, that's why it's not important for you to expose anyone. It isn't important for you to point fingers, because they see a lot of people. They do have experience with people who are just outrightly lying, and they see lots of personality types. So
Mhm.
yes, in some cases that is true. This person will expose themselves and show themselves for who they are, especially if you have documented evidence. If you
Mhm.
don't have documented evidence and then they're just there lording it around, it's very difficult. And in some cases, yes, that is true, like what you just said, that they do see them for who they are. In some cases, unfortunately not. They get away with everything
Yeah.
because they have the most expensive lawyer. They are charming. They say the right things. They do the right things. That's why it's so important to be on your A game and to be focused and to have, and I've said it many times in this chat, but to have a strategy in place.
Yes. And, someone brought up again with therapists, They asked, what if you are seeing a therapist? Can they vouch for you? Does it count as documenting? What are your thoughts about bringing a therapist into?
It it depends on the country where you are, because I know here in Australia, no,
Mhm.
you can't. So it depends where you are located in the world. I mean, I don't want to get into too much detail. You can have psych reports done on your high conflict ex if there is a valid enough reason for that to be done, but don't assume that that's just going to come out that they are high conflict or toxic or narcissistic or anything like that, because that's like, evaluation is maybe 1 or 2 hours. They can pretend for 1 or 2 hours, as you know, and come out looking like a sane person.
Yeah, and at least in the US, if you ask for a psych evaluation to be done on your ex, they usually do it for you too. They don't just do it for one person,
Yes.
both people have to do it.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
though, it could end up backfiring because if you're nervous or, there's all these things that could come into play. So I know that personally, a lot of people over here are against getting a psych evaluation done because of that reason. Um,
Well, this is the thing. It won't necessarily prove that your high conflict ex is a high conflict narcissist abusive. It's not necessarily going to prove that.
mhm,
And yes, it could backfire, but it's not necessarily going to give you the outcome that you want unless you have really strong evidence and reason to believe that they will fail that test. But just bear in mind that if it's 1 or 2 hours, they can pretend for as long as they need to in that short period of time. They'd have to be evaluated for a whole year for anything to really come out. And they'd have to have their communication evaluated. They'd have to have how they live evaluated, how they deal with their children
mhm.
evaluated. So,
It's
yeah. And, sorry.
it's rough. It's not an easy process.
Yeah, it isn't. It isn't. But although it sounds very simple, facts are facts are facts. Documented evidence is evidence.
Mhm.
Everything you've been through aside, you do need to kind of be this solid as a rock person, take your emotions out of it and just state facts, answer the questions that need answering, stay controlled and grounded, because this other person will try and derail you and throw you off your game in and out of court.
Mhm. So I kind of want to switch gears because we're getting close to, I think, an hour almost. So I just want to wrap up a
Mm,
little bit. But I know that one of I think the hottest topic that was asked was how do you deal with the new spouse of the high conflict parent?
yeah.
Sometimes there's two different ways it can go. Either you get somebody who it acts like witchy or mean or manipulative, and then you get somebody who is more compassionate. But I know that either way, the majority of the time, these individuals, the spouses, are hearing what is going on from the toxic ex. So they're not going to believe anything that the other parent is saying, and they get these hard feelings against the other parent, which leads to this toxic dynamic. So how
Yeah.
do you kind of go about making things peaceful between the new spouse, or is there a way that you can kind of do that? I know every case is different.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, every case is different, and I actually had this in one of my coaching calls with one of my group clients, because she had to be in the same vicinity as the new spouse who just recently had a baby, and it was a shock because she didn't realize that she was going to be there. Now, it can go both ways. You can get someone who is witchy, and you
Mm-hmm.
can get someone who is nice, kind, compassionate, caring.
Mm-hmm.
It, it, it's kind of like, which do you prefer to have? Obviously the nice, kind, compassionate version is
Mm-hmm.
better.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of making the relationship peaceful, there shouldn't be too much interaction between you.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it depends on the nature of your dynamic, but
Mm-hmm.
your communication needs to be with the high conflict ex, the high conflict co-parent. Your children are going to come home and maybe tell you things. If it's good things, great. If it's not so good things, that's where you need to come in and actually be their voice, be their advocate, and teach them how to deal with these certain situations, but also flag it with the high conflict co-parent, not for their benefit, for you to think that they're actually going to do anything about it, because they won't, but just so it's documented for future. You never know what you're going to need down the track. If this person eventually realizes what they're dealing with, they're going to be gone. So, and there'll be someone else. So you need to document everything, even if you think it's completely not relevant. And also be that teacher for your children. Yeah, and that's kind of the work that I do with my clients within the Co-Parenting Club, where we support you through your specific situation. Like, I've had this situation, I don't know how to deal with this, or I'm going to the ball game, they're going to be there, how do I navigate this? How am I going to deal with it if she approaches me? Or how am I going to deal with it if, start having a fight or altercation or whatever it may be? There are ways to navigate these things. It's just being prepared and having the right tools and the right strategies in place, because there's nothing worse, and the anxiety and the kind of stress comes from being unprepared and not knowing how to manage a situation. If you're prepared, it's still going to throw you off a little bit, but you're going to be able to manage it a lot better than if you're not prepared. And that's the support that I give.
Yeah, and I think that, when the new spouse is brought up and we first hear that they're being put into our lives, our first instinct is always this anxiousness, because we don't know what to expect. We know how our ex is, so we already have that to go off of. And now this new person is coming in, and they might, either add to our family dynamic in a positive way or a negative way. And again, every situation is totally different, but from my own personal story, me and my ex, and he luckily listened for as long as I know, we decided that we have to meet the other spouse before they meet the child, just to be able to get that face-to-face interaction, just so that way there's a face to the name, and just keep it very short and brief. And again, this is all depending on how your dynamic is with the other co-parent. And then after that, you don't want to try to convince the other spouse that the person is bad, that the person is toxic. You don't want to try to tell them all the abusive things that have happened, because at the end of the day, they're going to believe the person that they're dating, most likely. And then you're going to look like the crazy ex, and it's just going to further validate everything that the toxic person is telling them. So from my own standpoint,
and also...
from my standpoint, I just waited, and I just, we have this nice respect for each other. We don't really see each other ever. We don't reach out to each other. But in front of my daughter, we all try to create a positive atmosphere, because we want the kids to be feeling like they're safe around these other people. So once that kind of breaks off and there is drama, then you can start documenting and you can start doing all those things to kind of protect them more. But it kind of goes into that point of controlling what you have in front of you and controlling things from your side. You want to put out that positiveness and not come off controlling and vindictive or crazy to the new spouse. You just want to kind of step back and let them figure that on their own.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we're coming up on an hour together. I know that you have a very busy day ahead of you, so I don't know if anyone has any short questions. Maybe we can answer one or two. If anybody wants to throw one in the chat. I know there's a couple questions that came up before, but I definitely missed them. They flew by.
Yeah, they do go very quickly. And I just on the back of what you said about the new spouse, it's an ideal situation if you can meet them ahead of time, but just bear in mind that a lot of high conflict exes don't want you to meet, unfortunately. So you're going to have to find another way or make peace with the fact that you may never meet them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Tips for visits. Tips for visits in your own home. I don't know. I have no tips, but ew.
Yeah,
sorry.
That's not convenient.
It isn't convenient. I had a client who did that, and it just affects your whole energy because she wanted to control, where the child was being visited, and be around. But it's not convenient. It means they're in your home, creating this disgusting aura. I don't have any tips, except maybe you want to not be there or have some kind of arrangement. If you want to be have supervised visits, maybe get someone to supervise, but I would not be doing that myself personally. It wouldn't be possible. I don't want that filtering into my life and my peace.
Well, no, and also you kind of have to, that's your safe space, that's your home. And so when your children aren't there, it's your time to try to find your peace and deal with the anxieties of them, not being with you. And if you don't have that safe space for yourself, it makes it very hard to do that. As well as it's kind of a boundary.
Especially when it's been tainted.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a boundary issue.
Boundary. Yeah, it's not ideal.
Not ideal. I'm sorry about that.
The question, the covert narcissist says, I'm not co-parenting with her, keeping it neutral and she's lost all control. I'm not sure what the question was there, but my biggest thing to say is whatever they're saying is usually what they're doing. They project a lot. And it isn't co-parenting, unfortunately. It is parallel parenting.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into controlling your own space, your own area.
Can the high conflict parent bring other people to the visit, even though it's not noted in the court order? It really depends on your specific situation. Where are they visiting? Is it somewhere outside of their home? Are they taking your children somewhere inappropriate? It really depends on the situation, but I don't think court orders really go into that much detail, and they'll only go into that much detail if you have that written into your court orders. If you don't have it written, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I know from my side of things, we have in our court order that since my ex is the one with the parenting time, he works full time, so he only has every other weekend, which is 3 days, and so for him, he has to be present through the duration of his visit. But, the judges and the lawyer, they said that you really can't control who they're bringing around your child during their parenting time.
Yeah.
So it's painful. I know that there's a lot of toxic grandparents and friends and spouses, but at the end of the day, they won't allow you to control that part of your arrangement.
Who is around.
Unless it's extreme, unless it's like serious issues, and then they might have supervised visitation.
Yes. Like if they hang around with drug dealers or things like that.
Oh gosh, hopefully not. It happens, I'm sure, but that would be terrible.
But it does, unfortunately, or like inappropriate, kind of lifestyle habits. But with these questions, like I have a co-parenting club where you can have like tailor-made support and coaching with me within a group setting, and training as well, specific for your situation, and fortnightly coaching. I think you guys call it bi-weekly coaching. So that's a co-parenting club. Link in my bio for all the details on that, because as your situation is unfolding, there's no one thing that anyone can tell you. You really need to get to that place where you need to believe that it's possible. You need to have the right support around you, and you have to want to do something within your control to manage that situation.
Yes, and one of the reasons why I was so excited to bring Sarah for you guys and for her to kind of share her expertise and her advice is that she has dealt with this herself. She works with many clients, and I think that she's a great asset for you guys to be able to learn from. So I definitely recommend checking out her account. She'll have her link in her bio, so that way you can reach out to her, DM her, and she can hopefully point you in the right direction and help you out. Someone just asked, how do we connect with you, Sarah?
Just go to my profile on Instagram. Go to my profile, and there's a link there that has details on the co-parenting club, details on working with me one-on-one, some free resources there as well, and a great video on the risk of negative parenting that's just kind of puts things in perspective for you. Although you know your situation, it just kind of puts it in a different kind of frame for you, because it is hard, it is difficult, but you're definitely not alone. I've been through it, going through it. I co-parent with a lot of high conflict exes, and I always have room for one more. So just bear that in mind. And I can't hold my shit together and help other people if I didn't have my shit together. Excuse my French, but
no, but it's true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah.
Perfect. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
very
thank you
welcome.
so much. This
Thank you
was
for
so
having me.
great, and I hope that everyone was able to take something away that really helped them out because I know that it answered a lot of my own questions too. So, thank you. Oh, we might have lost. Oh, there you are. But thank
Yeah,
you
it
so
kind of
much,
keeps
everyone.
dropping out.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna save this for you guys. So you can go ahead and look at that in the videos. I'll tag Sarah's account in there so that way you'll be able to click over to her pretty easily. It just might take me a couple minutes to set all of that up, so please be patient. But thank you all for joining us, and I hope you all have a great day.